I guess I'm going to take the opportunity to do our first video and taking some of your advice as to potentially doing like a math concept, but then maybe even a broader abstract idea to tie it in. So I thought this first one I would do involves interest, and I'm gonna try and reference maybe where I got the idea before I do it, because not all of these thoughts are just mine. I just didn't make them up. Now, I made up the pictures, and I'm going to make up my explanation, but a lot of my ideas come by prompting. And this book called The Compound Effect sort of prompted me into thinking that many times we can take these very concrete formulas, interest rate formulas, and apply them to our life and apply them to bigger, broader ideas. So let's just talk in terms of math just for a second. So there are three interest formulas that I'm going to bring your attention to. The first one is a simple interest formula. And all that really says is, hey, how much money we can bring in depends on how much you're willing to invest. So let's just say, for our example, $100. Multiplied by the interest rate that someone is going to give you. Okay, so I wrote 6%. And then how long are you willing to keep it invested at 1 year? Okay, so if that's the simple interest formula, and that's a boring formula, but a lot of people can wrap their heads around it. It's just multiplication step. So P times R times T, and if you multiply that, you get 6. And so what that means is after 1 year, you'd have $106. The 100 you started with, and then add on 6 more, okay? Well, then there's something called compound interest, hence the compound effect. And what compound interest says is, well, we can make our money grow even more. So in that compound interest, we add another variable, and this variable is how many times would you like us to multiply that? Okay, instead of just the one-time effect, how many times would you like us to do this? And I just picked a random number, 4. Let's compound it 4 times. So now the formula gets a little bit trickier. It says this principal, $100, gets multiplied by, and now here's this funky little quotient. It's a division step. In our example, it would be 0.06 divided by 4, and then we would take it to the 4 times 1 power, or the 4th power. So it would look like this. It would be 100, and then we would have 1 plus 0.06, 6% and 0.06 are the same thing, divided by 4, and then we multiply it by the 4 times 1 power. And if we did that for a year, compound interest would give us 106.13. So a 13-cent increase. Well, that's boring. And quite frankly, I can't make much of an argument for valuing compound interest over simple interest if we look at it in just 1 year. There is a third one. This is actually a very abstract idea. We don't see this too often in mathematical fields, but you do see it in higher level math quite a bit. And this E starts to take place of some other formulas. And if you're interested in the E, maybe I'll save that for another discussion. But this formula gives us 106.18. Okay, so after 1 year, the difference is merely 18 cents with the values that we plugged in. Okay, well, of course, what I wanted to do is I wanted to extend that time period a little longer. I wanted to think in terms of maybe 5 years and 25 years. Okay, now that's a longer time, of course, but let's see what happens to the interest. So simple interest after 5 years. Now the 106 became 130. So now we've made $30, which is better. The 106.13 has become 134.92, and the 106.18 has become 134.98. So after 5 years, we're still only talking about a $4 difference. I mean, it's I don't know if I can even argue for that. Would you be willing to invest your money in a compound formula over a simple formula if after 5 years the difference is just $4? It doesn't make a great argument. But then we jump to 25 years, and as you can tell, when you start to extend the time period, that's when the compound interest and what's called the continuously compounding interest really starts to take hold. And after 25 years with a simple interest formula, I was at 250. So I had made $150. But way up there, the difference now was dramatic. Now I was at 447.96 and 448.16. So those two are still very close. There is room to grow above the purple line, but this red line and this purple line, they start to diverge dramatically as the time starts to increase. And that's really what this book was about. And notice it says the compound effect. Jumpstart your income, your life, your success. And us math teachers, we talk in numbers, and numbers are validating, and they can, they provide evidence and concrete, real facts. And many times, when these formulas are presented to you, they're only presented in terms of a principle: how much you invest money, the interest rate, how much someone's willing to give you for your money to grow. How long are you willing to part with your money so it can grow, and then the number of times that it compounds. Well, just from an abstract standpoint, what if we actually thought of it more in abstract terms about how you can grow your life, how you can be successful with your life? And rather than calling principal some amount of money, what if principal was just how much of yourself you were willing to invest? Right? How much were you willing to dedicate to a certain cause? We're tugged and we're pulled in so many different directions by so many different people, but what if we dedicated a certain amount of our time into a cause, and potentially we could see that as our principle? Now, it doesn't really make sense to give it a number because we can't really quantify how much of ourselves we're willing to give. But you can feel it when you're doing it, that principle becomes this purpose almost. So let's just call it that. Now, your interest rate, this thing obviously impacts your rate of growth. I mean, your interest rate, if it's 20%, it's going to grow more dramatically than if it were 2%. So, in my mind, what do I see as your interest rate? Well, your interest rate potentially could be the people that you're willing to make contacts with. Are you willing to grow your social network? Are you willing to be courageous enough to go out and meet new people? Or do you just simply retract into your small circle? Your interest rate could be the time of day at which you read books. Instead of just reading books in the evening to go to bed, do you read them in the morning to grow? So your interest rate potentially could be, once you find your purpose, what periods of the day, what time of the day, who are you willing to help you grow your purpose? Your T would be how long. Many people, they're willing to put in a day, a week, a year, and if they don't see dividends, they tap out and they move to the next project. Some people are even bold enough to put in 2 years, 3 years, maybe even 5 years. But again, as you can see at the 5-year mark, you still might not see the dividends that you were wanting to see, you were expecting to see. So potentially you might get discouraged and tap out in that respect. But obviously, I use the phrase, if you play the long game, if you invest over a very large amount of time, that's when the dividends might start to pop up. And then the end is how often are you willing to do it? there's a whole bunch of research about where progress lies with respect to practice, and some people have even thrown a certain amount of numbers on it. They've quoted the 10,000 hour rule, and I think that's just an arbitrary number. But regardless, this how often are you willing to compound that effect? And if you do it 100 times, that 100 times really gets to impact your final amount. You know, do you do it twice? Do you do it 100 times? And the imagination is this super powerful tool. You know, doing it 100 times doesn't just have to imply you're physically doing it 100 times. You can recreate those things in your mind as often as you want. You just have to be willing to go there. So this is a visual of progress, of growth. And some people grow with a simple interest model. That's a linear vision, a linear version of growth. Some people grow in a compound interest. Those are the people that make more progress, of course. Those are the people that have discipline. Those are the people that make connections, that meet new people. Really, the only reason I have the green line is so my disciplined folks know there's always room for progress. I would like to say that the green line is unattainable. It's this perfect out of reach model that we strive for, but we can never get to. So something to consider. Simple interest, compound interest, and continuously compounding interest. These two things have a little bit more application. Obviously, there's financial implications, financial applications, but potentially, maybe you could in fact use it to jumpstart your life, to get moving in the right direction. Okay? Thanks.